Hello, this presentation is my guidelines for being Toastmaster of the day. I suggest you print out these sheets, maybe not one page for each sheet, but you print them out and you can use them as a guide. And so let's just explain there is no set exact rules on how to do this particular role, but these are the rules that I tend to run by. And these are my experiences, mostly of being at Epsom speakers, but at being quite a few other clubs where I've picked up little ideas. And I'm going to explain some of the reasons behind some of the things that I do and why I do them so that you can see the context. Before the meeting, it's the old adage, if you fail to prepare, you're preparing for a failure. So all your role holders need to be confirmed well in advance so you know exactly who's doing what. You don't want to be trying to organise people just before the meeting starts. Firstly, it's stressful. Secondly, it's unprofessional. And thirdly, it always means you start late, and that's not good. All your speakers should be confirmed, and you really need the title of each speech as well. And the evaluators need to be confirmed to their speakers and make sure they've been in touch so they actually know what they're going to talk about. So again, they don't look silly, because let's face it, if anyone looks wrong, lost, it makes your role look like it's failed. So you want to make sure everybody can deliver their best. Always best to have a backup speaker and a backup evaluator, people who you know you can slip in without any fuss into any of the roles and you need it. And make sure that agendas are printed and you know who's bringing them so everybody knows. And whatever anyone else is doing, make sure you have a copy of the agenda. So once we get to the meeting room, get a bit early, make sure everybody is okay for their role. Just a quick check, make sure everybody is correct for their role and there's no last minute hiccups. So let's have a look at the diary for the beginning. It opens with the Sergeant at Arms who will do their welcome. They will lead on to the President who will give their welcome on behalf of the club and their short speech. And then they will introduce you as Toastmaster of the day. So this is your opening speech. Don't speak for ages. You've got plenty of chances to speak, so don't speak for ages. Thank the President for their introduction. Welcome everybody to the meeting. Make a special effort to welcome the guests, not individually, just acknowledge they're there so they feel that they're part of it. And explain to everybody that you're the Toastmaster today and you are running the event and you will lead everybody through the agenda. Do not explain the whole agenda in detail. You're going to do that as you go along. Just give a brief overview of the night. And my brief overview is usually something along these lines. Tonight we have 3 members who will be presenting speeches that they have prepared. These will then be evaluated by other members. There will be a break for drinks, and I think we've got some nice cake and biscuits as well. And then after the break, we have a session of impromptu speaking, which will be coordinated by whoever. Guests and visitors will be able to join in that stage if they wish. And it's a good idea to see the reaction of these guests at that point. You gauge how much they're going to be involved in the meeting. Then the next thing you need to do is introduce the other role holders. And you will need to check which role holders are around and being used to know which ones to introduce. But you introduce each one in turn. So you need to explain why first. So however, to run our meeting, I need the support of other members. Firstly, there's a role of videographer, performed tonight by Bob. Bob, could you please explain your role to us? Let them explain their role and repeat for each of those role holders. And then when you've gone through those role holders, it's very easy to go on to the next stage by just saying, the next person I would like to introduce is X, who will run the warm-up for us and hand over the stage. You don't need to explain the warm-up. That's up to the warm-up artist to explain. You didn't need to explain any of the roles because the role holders explain it for them. After the warm-up, you take the stage again and you say, it's time to introduce the speakers. We now have 3 speeches. You want a little introduction? That's fine. And then you need to introduce the speakers, but you need to also understand how you're going to do this. Firstly, you could introduce the speakers and they could do their speeches. Secondly, you could introduce the evaluators who will then introduce speakers who do their speeches. And the third option is you can introduce the evaluators who then pass the stage back to you and you then introduce the speakers. However you do it, try and be consistent for all three speakers, otherwise people will get confused. And again, I do it something along the lines of, our first speaker is X, he'll be evaluated by Y. Y, could you please outline their speech objectives? They do that, then they go away, and I will say, with a speech entitled Z, please welcome X. Simple as that. At the end of each speech, thank the speaker. Don't comment on their speech. It's not the time to do it. Just thank them for their speech. Be consistent. And after all the speeches, ask the timer for a minute to allow members to write feedback and show the piece of paper for the guests so that they know what it is as well. At the end of each speech, give a minute. If you're running short of time, you might have to reduce that to 45 seconds. You've got to time manage this situation, but usually you should be giving a minute because that's plenty of time then for the speakers to get some valuable feedback. If you get shorter because you're short of time, they don't get good feedback. So you really want to try and make sure you give them that minute. When the speeches have all been completed, you've got a choice here. You could ask the timekeeper for a report of the speeches. This is quite good if you're up on time, because this time delay then gives the evaluators a bit more breathing space to get their evaluations ready rather than being thrown straight into it. If you're short of time, you may not ask the timekeeper. You may keep the timekeeper report back and ask for it after the evaluations. But make sure you remember if you have or haven't asked the timekeeper's report, and make sure you do before any voting. After the speakers, we've got the evaluators. So again, you can introduce this section by saying something like, everything in Toastmasters is evaluated. So we will now share and learn our skills together and hear from the evaluators. Our first evaluator is X, who will evaluate the speech of, you might even want to throw in the title, by Y. Please welcome X. Go through the evaluators. Again, at the end of each evaluation, if you're up to time, you want to give 1 minute for members to write an evaluation of the evaluators. If you're short of time, this is where you are more likely to cut than for speakers. But if you can, you want to give 1 minute for the evaluator's evaluation. At the end of the evaluations, you now have, usually what I do is have all the times and votes now. Now, the reason we have the votes in the same place is because it's just too time consuming to have two sets of votes, to have the votes in one place. You probably also for time are going to have the timing. So you ask the timekeeper to give the reports for the speakers and the evaluators. And while they're giving that, you can ask people to prepare their votes, and you can ask whoever's collecting the votes, the ballot counter, to collect the votes. Voting is time consuming, so better to have the two in one place. Now, it's traditional at Epsom that this is the point where we introduce the guests. Tactically, I think it's a really good time to do it because they've had a chance to hear speakers and evaluations. So the guests have got to understand what is going on and they've experienced it. This is a good time for them to be introduced. And we're just about to go on a break. So that means that the guests will be introduced to the club members, and the club members will now know what to go and talk to the guests about. It's a really clever time to do it. And that's why I suggest you do it. But you don't want to have 10 minutes of chat with the guests. You want to just simply introduce the guests. Hopefully you know who's who, ask them their name, and ask them to briefly tell you why they have joined, and politely interrupt them if they start going on. Then we get to the second half. Now, there is an argument to say that you shouldn't say anything. It's a bit weird if the Sergeant Arms is going to pull everybody to order and introduce you. All you're going to do is introduce the Topics Master. But that's the way it goes. But again, a simple introduction to the Table Toastmaster, it's up to them to explain what they do. So now we have a session of impromptu speaking, which will be led by, and then give the name of the Toastmaster. The Table Topics Master will then take over, do the impromptu speaking, and at the end, you need to watch for one thing. Do they do the timekeeper's report and the voting? If they don't do the timekeeper's report and the voting, you will then need to ask the timekeeper for the times and then do the voting. If they do, then you don't have to worry about it. When that is all finished and you have the votes, this is now your chance to say goodbye. There is no reason for you to say any more and be involved anymore. You will be handing on to the general evaluator who hands on to the president. There's no more reason for you to do anything else. So make it obvious by saying, thank you very much. My job now is done. Thank you for those that supported me. Thank you for those that took up a role. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the evaluators. Might even want to throw in, thank you very much to the guests for being here. But of course, as in Toastmasters, we say everything is evaluated. So I'd like to pass the stage on to our general evaluator, whoever, you will give an evaluation of the whole meeting. Thank you. And then leave the stage. And hopefully the general evaluator just hands straight on the president and you won't have to worry about doing anything else. That is it. And if you do it that way, it actually turns out to be very easy. It's okay as long as you stay organized. Mistakes you have are not being organized. So please be organized, enjoy it. It's a great experience. And if you gave me the choice, I would be Toastmaster of the Day every meeting.